Hey, this is Kieran, Coach's Corner Chats, and joining me is Jake Edwards. Jake, where are you at and what are you up to?
I'm back in the United Kingdom at the minute, so I'm in a town called Ellesmere Port, and I'm just visiting and catching up with friends and family for the most part of the minute.
Where would that be? Is there a big city somewhere in that area that kind of maybe gives us a better idea?
I mean, to be honest, in England, like there's always a big city nearby because it's such a small country. But yeah, so like I'm about 15 minutes from Liverpool, so it's kind of 15 minutes from Liverpool and maybe 40 minutes from Manchester. So it's in the northwest of England.
And then you said you're visiting, so where do you call home?
Well, obviously Southern Illinois at the minute. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm living at the minute. So I don't get a chance to see my family that often or my friends that often. So yeah, coming back at the minute, it's kind of like I would say it's a bit of a vacation, but I've got so many things planned and so many people that I've got to see, and you just got to try and catch up, have the same conversation with everyone. And yeah, so it's Southern Illinois is where I'm living at the minute. But yeah.
What was it like growing up that close to Liverpool and the whole idea of just like soccer in England?
Do you know what? I think being in America, it does make you think a lot now because obviously growing up in England, like you kind of just think, oh, well, it's probably the same everywhere. Um, I mean, growing up near Liverpool, obviously, you've got Liverpool and Everton fans. That's a big rivalry. And I think the great thing about England is that there's 92 professional clubs in such a small geographical country. Um, Whereas like in the US, like when you consider how big the nation is, and obviously the MLS is growing, but I remember I used to come over in the 90s, used to go to Florida, and there was like very few professional teams. Like, the MLS was just kind of starting. And I think obviously the growth of it's amazing, but that's like a huge difference, I think, between the countries. It's like if you live in, say, like a state like Montana and you like soccer, the nearest professional club that you can go. I mean, I wouldn't even want to have a hazard a guess of where the near, maybe Seattle Sounders. I maybe. But yeah, so I think so. Growing up in the UK, you kind of take it for granted, but then living in America and being like, oh, you can't just go like 10 minutes. Like Tranmere Rovers is probably the nearest team to me. Like it's like 15 minutes away. You can't just go to like some of the players at Southern Illinois were like, oh, go to St. Louis. They've just got a new MLS team. But to me, it's like that's 2.5 hours away. I need a couple of weeks to plan that kind of drive. Like, so it's like it's crazy. I mean, it's great. Like I love being in America, but yeah, there's definitely a few differences, and I do wonder if that has an impact, especially because there's things like football, there's basketball, there's baseball, which are obviously a lot more popular in America. So, then if you have fewer professional teams and they're a lot more dispersed. If you grow up somewhere where there isn't a professional soccer team, but then you have like football and there's so much history and heritage with that sport. Obviously being in Illinois, you've got the Chicago Bears, who I know aren't particularly good at the minute, but there's so much history there with that team. So it's kind of like and so I think it's definitely a culture shock. Trying to have a conversation with someone about the Premier League is not the easiest, but I very much enjoy it anyway.
So when you're born and you're growing up there in England, is soccer just something you just start playing? Like, how did you get into the game of soccer?
I think it was my stepdad was probably the first person, and he's a Manchester United fan. So he was kind of I don't even know how. I think I was watching a game with him or something like that, and I think it was a way for me to try and like connect with him and like have something in common with him. So we'd play in the backyard, and then one of the things in the UK is like every street you go down, kids are just always kicking a ball in the street, and it doesn't sound the safest that, but like if you like live down like a quiet road, there's always like all the kids in the street like play after school. And like in America, you see it with basketball. Like, you go to a basketball court, there's always kids there, whether it's like 2v2 or 5v5, or there's just, always kids. And, I don't see that as much in America, but in the UK, it's just like you just play in the street all day on the weekends. After school, you're always in the street, especially like in May when the weather is good and the nights are lighter. You come in and that was what you did. It was, you play in your backyard. you'd go down the local park, like I said, play in the street. Then you obviously play for a team, you play for your school. So it is kind of non-stop. It's like I think in America it's a lot more. There isn't maybe as much of that. But it's just something that you grew up with. You know, like my elder sisters, they would play football on the street as well. And then then the younger kids that are kind of like grown up, then they come and join in as the older kids then go off and grow up, I suppose. So I think that was, we have like the way our our streets have their names on them. They're kind of like, it's like it comes out of the ground, and it's kind of like a really like miniature goal, and like a ball like is small enough to go in there. So you're like, you've got one over there and you've got one over there. You're like, well, there's our field, there's our 2 goals, and it's like, and you just play in the street, and like I said, it's not the safest when you've got cars going past, but you just, that was just how I was kind of brought up, like on council estates and things like that. You just, wherever you could, you just played, and it was just the norm.
So did that then lead to like playing for your local school?
Yeah, I think I used to go to these soccer schools in like the half terms, and when the schools broke up, and then they were starting a team. It was called Heswell, and it's on the Wirral Peninsula. And I trialed, and I got in, and I got in the team, but I didn't know how to play in a team because there was never any kind of like structure, or like I never really knew anything about positions. Like I remember I played for the school very early on, and it must have been I'd been playing in like organized. Like if I was playing in the street and you just get the ball and you run and you play, it's great. But then if someone's telling you, right, your position's this, this, and this, and I was like, I have not got any clue what's going on. So like I remember I played striker for my school in like the second game. And I don't think I moved more than 5 yards. And like I moved 5 yards, maybe that way or that way. But I just stayed in like where I just thought I need to be in front of the goal. Just stay in front of the goal. And because I just didn't really have a concept at that age. And, I think that was kind of like 9 or 10 when I first joined the team. And there's, people will say, just let the kids play, just let them play. But we had a coach that was like quite strict at the time. So I didn't play very much when I first joined that team. And I actually remember my mum's quite an outspoken person. So if I wasn't playing on the team, she would let the coach know. I remember she like dragged me from the side on one of the games and took me home. She was like, I waste my weekends coming to watch you play soccer, and you're not even playing. Like, come on, you're going to another team. And I joined another team, and that worked out a lot better. I had some school friends there. So I think, my earliest memory of playing in a team, I was like, I just didn't know what to do. I just like, I was a good player, and I could play in the backyard, I could play in the street. But then when it came to like, oh, you're going to kind of play on this side, I was like I don't know what my roles and responsibilities are. I don't know, what to do. And I think now with coaching kids, there is a lot more of a just let them play, get the ball and let them play. But I think growing up in the 90s in the UK, every single coach, and you probably have coaches now, think they are like a Pep Guardiola. They think they're a Jose Mourinho. And then it's like, so that was kind of how I was coached to begin with. So I joined a team, and I stayed there for a couple of years, and then I had to leave because I did bad in school. So my mum was like, nope, you're not playing. You need to get your grades up. So I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, when I was like 12 or 13. So yeah, I wouldn't say I was the best player as a kid. I give me a ball, I was decent, but stick me in a team, and I was like, I don't know. I just didn't really understand the roles and responsibilities as much.
Has that being in that spot as a player helped you as a coach to be a little bit more cognizant of your communication of roles and responsibilities like you just talked about versus just say, hey, I need you here, being a little bit more like, what does that mean? Kind of knowing that you went through that same experience.
I think definitely, because as I got older and coaches would talk to me about and find ways to relate to me, because I watch soccer all the time. So they would say like, give me a player and kind of that responsibility. And so I kind of used that as a coach. I started coaching when I was 16. And then because everyone like life over here is like, you watch soccer all the time as well. Like you just watch every game. So I would start coaching, and I would kind of relate to other players. And I'd be like, I don't expect you to be as good as that player, but that kind of role or responsibility. And then if they watch the game, then it's like, well, watch that player if you can. Obviously, it doesn't help because the camera follows the ball. But yeah, it is. I think it's the communication is probably the most important thing as a coach. Like, I mean, you could be a really good coach and have great ideas and, you know, great tactics and whatnot. But if the players don't understand, like if you're going to make it, you know, overcomplicated and you can't just maybe simplify it and, you know, just kind of one or two things, you know, for the players to focus on, then it is very hard. So yeah, I think that was definitely something that, just from my own experience as a player, I was kind of like, you know, the players need to be able to buy in to what I'm saying. And it was not as easy as that. When I started coaching Warrington, and this was about 2016, and I was talking to one of the girls and I was explaining, telling about a player, and I was kind of saying, I want you to kind of do this role. And she just looked at me and she went, I don't even watch football. And I was like, that was just like, I just kind of assumed that she did because she played soccer. Like, and so I was like, oh, she was like, I just think it's really boring, but I love playing it. And I was like, okay, great. And then for me, it was like, well, that's a learning experience because, yeah, she's right. Like, just because she plays it doesn't mean everyone knows what I'm talking about. And, you know, sometimes players sometimes can be a bit shy to say, I don't know what you mean. Like, I don't know, you know. So it was just the fact that she just looked at me deadpan and was like, I don't even watch football. Like, I don't like it. I was like, oh, okay. It's like, well, this has been a barrier that we've overcome now. So yeah, I think communication. I think from me playing to becoming a coach, there probably was some kind of crossover there. Yeah.
And you mentioned starting coaching at 16.
Yeah, 16. Yeah.
I mean, what's at that age? I think about 16, like 'cause over here in the States, that's like getting my driver's license and just like starting to get some independence. What is it like when you start taking over the reins and start coaching? When you look back, what was that experience like?
I think it's like probably the most important part of maybe being a coach, because I think in the UK it's very hard to get a full-time job coaching over here. I mean, like in America, the whole college system is huge. Like the reason I wanted to come to the NCAA or even the NAIA, but like coming over to America, it was like they don't have that in England, and I don't think any other country does college sport like America. Like, and not just in soccer, but like in other sports, like it's huge. So getting a full-time job in soccer coaching in the UK is very, very difficult, and especially if you've never been a player. I think with professional clubs, when they hire coaches, it's kind of like if you're a name rather than maybe your coaching experience, you know, they can justify bringing you in because, well, this person played for this. So when I started coaching and I look back at it now, it was voluntary. You know, I did it out of my own free time. I bought the equipment myself. I went into my old elementary school and another elementary school and did after school sessions. And then I kind of just did that for a little while. And then I coached at the community. So I was at a community college from 16 to 19, and I would do some sessions there as well. So a lot of it is you're not doing it for the money. You are just doing it to coach and get. And if I could watch myself back then, like there probably is a lot of things that you would go, oh dear, not great. But it was enjoyable. Like I kind of knew that was maybe the path I wanted to go down. I did my FA level 1 when I was 16 or 17, and I was in community college studying sport. And you know, I knew that was the avenue I wanted to go down. And yeah, I think it was just kind of getting introduced to it and kind of understanding that leadership role and responsibility and, you know, setting a good example. They were all things that, you know, yeah, I learned it at a pretty young age, but I actually think that was so key because I've got that experience of driving 30 minutes to deliver a session for free and driving 30 minutes back. And at the time working in a hotel as a waiter and a barman, you know, to pay for gas so I could go and do that. So, you know, I think that those experiences, like they were extremely invaluable.
What was it at that time that kind of let you think you were like, I think that was something I wanted to get into was coaching. What was it about that? What was something that kind of maybe was the thing that turned your eye to like, you know what, I think instead of maybe just playing, I think coaching might be my jam.
I think it was just the like having fun with it as well. And I think I've always been able to communicate pretty well with people. And when I finished, I think I did maybe like 6 to 8 weeks first, and then there was like a half term, and then one of the teachers were like, "Oh, the kids have been pestering me, like, when are you coming back?" And that was kind of like a nice, like, oh, like, they want me to come back. And so that was kind of maybe I am good at this. Whether I was actually a good coach and whether the kids actually just like me as a personality, but I think they go hand in hand. Like, again, you've got to be a good personality with kids. So I did enjoy it, but I even knew then at that age that it's going to be pretty hard to have it as a full-time job. I mean, typically elementary schools, the physical education teacher will do the soccer after school, do the rugby after school, do the tennis after school, because then the school doesn't have to, get like your CRB, which is kind of like your background check and things like that. But yeah, I think it was kind of, I suppose, the reaction from the players. And yeah, I think also I really liked making it my own, where, we did like, I mean, everyone does it, but like a competition or a tournament, so like, the last 20 minutes you would draft teams or something like that. And you'd have like if we did like an 8-week block, we'd have a best of 8 series or something like that. I had that freedom to kind of make those mistakes as well, like a bit of trial and error. And I liked that about it. And yeah, I think, I mean, obviously if the players had turned around and said, "Oh no, we don't want him to come back," I'd maybe doing something completely different. But I think once I knew the players enjoyed it, then it was like, oh yeah, like, and obviously being around soccer is always going to be fun, and I always wanted to do something in soccer. So yeah, I think probably the player reaction.
So 16 to 19, doing this gig voluntarily. What's the next step? Like, where do you start going now? Like you said, difficult in England. Is that when you start to look at maybe some other options?
So I finished when I was 19. I was coming to the end of that academic year. So I was finishing community college, and I did not want to go to like it's a 3-year university degree. Obviously, it's 4-year in America. I didn't want to do that. I'd always wanted to go to America, so I thought, I'll do the summer camp. So obviously with Challenger Sports was the company that I went out with, and I just got my FA level 2, and I was pretty naive because when I finished, because I was at this point as well, I was working sort of like 30 hours as a waiter in a hotel, and I've been doing that since I was 16. So I'd finished community college, and I'd kind of come to the end of working as a waiter, and I went out for 4 months with Challenger, and I was in the Baltimore region in 2009, and I absolutely loved it. I loved America. I mean, I'd been America before, but I loved traveling each week to a different place, working with different coaches, learning different things. And it really kind of teaches you a lot about yourself, being away from your family, and then unpacking with, meeting a new host family, unpacking all your things, getting to know them. And then 7 days later, you're packing up and you're saying goodbye. And it's, and it's the, but then coaching all those kids and all those players, and I think you have to have like a different alter ego for different age groups. So if you're coaching 3-year-olds, you have to have like a different, persona, and then you're coaching 15, 16-year-olds, so that was kind of what I did. And I remember coming back, and I was really naive. I was like, I'll come back and I'll just get a job in Everton's academy. And even to this day now, with all my coaching experience and my qualifications, there I am. Someone was trying to contact me. Yeah, I think like, so when I came back, I was like, oh, like Everton, I'll go and work in Everton's academy. And it's like, doesn't work like that, So I came back, and there was just nothing there for me. And so I went back to the hotel I worked at and kind of started waiting on tables again. And that's when I decided I need to go to college. I need to go to university, get a coaching degree, something like that, something that, improve my education. And yeah, so I did that, and I ended up doing 4 summers with Challenger Sports. That was kind of my thing in the summer, where I think I went back to the community college that I'd studied at, coached them throughout the year, which was like 2 sessions a week, if that. And it was one of those things where they didn't have to be there. So you turn up and you don't know how many kids you're going to have and what they actually want to do. And, so you're trying to make it fun. And so, that was kind of what I was doing when I went to college for those kind of few years, and then started coaching the women's college team at the University of Chester. That was kind of 2012. So that was kind of like that sort of 3-4 year period. And, that was when I first got introduced to going to America. And yeah, I just kind of fell in love with the place.
So one of the things that comes to mind is you talked about stepdad, Man United fan, kind of got you introduced to it, and then mom, a strong personality. What was it like when you mentioned like, "Hey, I'm thinking about going to America for the summer to work on coaching and kind of figuring things out." What was that like? You talked about being away from home. What was it like for them?
I don't think I ever asked them. Because like, it's funny because like my stepdad like had a massive influence on me with soccer, and then like my father, my dad's actually like my best friend as well. So like I'm really, really lucky that I have that like kind of support network. But I do remember my mum crying at the airport. So I remember when I went to the airport and said goodbye, and like my dad kind of gave me just a quick hug because I think he knew like don't make it emotional. And there was some other coaches there that I was meeting, and we were flying together. And I was like, and my mum just burst into tears. So then I started crying, and I was like, well, this is awful. But I think she knew that it would be such an amazing experience to go over there and travel and just have this experience. And it was something that I had wanted to do when I started coaching. I had pinpointed like I'd love to go to America because I love the country and I love the culture. And I think also just like experiencing soccer in a different environment. And, like I said, being in all these different places, it's not like you're coaching the same kids for 8 weeks. You're in one place and you travel around. And, sometimes you're in a city and then sometimes you're in the middle of nowhere. But that's just all part of it. Like I enjoy stuff like that. I quite like that. So they were really supportive. And one of my elder sisters, she did Camp America. So like that's on like my dad's side of the family. So I think my dad and my stepmom had kind of like they knew that, and the kind of like the kids are going to often do what they want to do. And it's funny because like me and my 2 siblings, we all live in like different countries around the world now. Like none of us live in the UK. So and they probably my parents probably think it's to do with them, but it's generally not. So I think they were very, very supportive. They'd always like encourage me to go and follow my dreams and follow what I wanted to do. And so there was maybe some, I'll say, tears on the phone, but like sometimes you would get a bit homesick and like speak to my mom and I'd be like, oh, I'm ready to go home. But what I've learned is when I go to America and I go abroad and I come back after about 3 days, I just want to go back to America. Like those first 3 days of like seeing everyone, and then the novelty wears off. And then you get the kind of request from a grandmother to go around and do some jobs and chores for, and you're like, oh, here we go. Yeah, this is, yeah. So, yeah, no, but, to answer your question, yeah, they've just always been really, really supportive of whatever I've done.
When you look back at Chester, what was that first experience like of taking over like a actual program and coaching?
It's different to the US. It's not what you see in America. Like the university in the UK when it comes to sports teams is very competitive in the game. The games are on a Wednesday afternoon, and I think you train 2 or 3 times a week. But it's a fair comment to say that they enjoy their social life in season, and it's very hard because I think there are the top universities have scholarships, but the players come to get a degree and then they kind of go to trials and they kind of join a team, and it's not like. So it's not in the same where you hire. Like I was a student at the time myself, because I think I had my level 2, and I was doing a sports coaching degree, and I got on with some of the girls that they were like, "Oh, do you want to come and coach us, because we need a coach like a little bit of guidance." And I played on the men's team, so but that was really, really good because I think that was probably my first experience of coaching females, and I just remember like really being able to coach them and go into really good detail. Like they really wanted to like with guys in like my experience, especially when I was at the community college and you got like 18, 19-year-old guys. If you said 9 things they need to work on and one good thing, they'd live off the one good thing that you said. And you're like, whereas like, I feel like the females I coached in Chester, it was like, if you give them 9 really good things, but then one thing they need to work on, they want to know what they can do with that one thing. And that's just my experience. Like, so it was great. And they weren't, you know, great players and great athletes because they were there to study and they were there to socialize and have a good time and they wanted to play soccer. And but they, you know, they wouldn't be getting up in the morning and doing 2 a days and stuff like that. It was so that, but it was really good because then you have to find a really good balance between coaching them and affecting them and getting them to a point where they wanted to be coached, but you weren't too full on that it turned players away. It's kind of like it is a social environment. We want to keep that and we want to keep that enjoyment. But then also, you know, I do want to plan sessions and I do want to kind of explain what I'm doing and actually coach them. So it's, yeah, it was kind of like, how can I have a little bit of compromise and a bit of what I want to do, but then also listen to what they want as well? Because essentially, if they'd have all said, no, we don't like it, then they'd have all probably left the team and then, you know, it would have been a bit of a disaster.
So how long are you at Chester? And then what's the next step? What kind of where does your soccer coaching journey go from there?
So I was at Chester and then I had an opportunity to, I'm trying to think, I think 2013, I finished my degree. No, that's a lie. No, 2013. Yeah, I think it was 2013. And then 2014, I stayed to do a master's degree in sport leadership and management. And at that point, because I'd done 4 summers with Challenger, 2009, 10, 11, 12. And then I had an opportunity to go to Elche in Spain, and they were in La Liga at the time. And I was there for about a month, and it was a voluntary thing where I was going to work with, I would shadow the reserve team in the mornings by the stadium. And then in the evenings, I would shadow the assistant coaches in the academy, which was the first real experience of a professional club environment. I'd always emailed clubs like Everton and Tranmere and Liverpool and teams near me to say, can I go in like voluntary and I just wanted to see how it was ran at a professional level. I wanted to see coaches that had professional experience and how they were. And I never really got that opportunity. So when I went to Spain, like I said, it was only for about 4 weeks. So I did that when I was doing my master's. And then, yeah, so that was a real big thing. And then after that, I finished my master's and then I actually went to America for 10 months. I did a full 10-month stint with Challenger Sports I was living in Palo Alto, which was an incredible experience in California. I was there for about 10 months because I'd finished my education and I was like, oh, I can maybe stay out there. That was a bit of a harder one to sell to my parents because it was like, it's not just 3 months this time. It's like, I'm actually gone for 10 months. So yeah, with college, it was like the masters, a little bit of with Elche. And then once that had finished, it was like back over to America for 10 months.
You mentioned earlier the comparisons between the US and the UK. What was soccer like in Spain? Was it a similar vibe or was there noticeable differences there as well?
So one thing that I think at that time one thing that we were doing in the UK at that point was realizing that you need to teach kids to play and not to win. And I think certainly like growing up for me as a kid, when I was coached, you were being coached to win. Whereas in Spain, the kids were coached to play soccer. And I remember speaking to the Elche reserve captain, and his name was Charlie Janssen. And when I was watching him train, and he was the captain and he was communicating in Spanish. And then he said something under his breath in this thick London accent. And I was like, what? And it turned out that he'd he moved over when he was very young with his family from London. So we were talking to him, and he was like, over in Spain, you literally play the ball out from the back all the time. And he said, I would go home crying because we were being told to play the ball out from the back, and we would lose and we would concede loads of goals, but there was a reason behind it. Whereas in the UK, I remember being told by my coaches, if I played like right outside back as a defender, if the ball comes to you, you just get rid of the ball. You just hit it as far away as you possibly can, because they don't want you to concede. Whereas so for this guy, Charlie, he was being told from a young age. Now, I mean, I wouldn't recommend kids crying and losing, 6-7-0 because they're being forced to play out from the back. Maybe you kind of balance that out a little bit and say, we're going to play the first 15 minutes and try this, and then we'll try this or whatever. But so, yeah, it was very different. And then obviously, but then as Charlie got older, he was then comfortable playing out from the back. He was then, he could play soccer. He was a defender, and he was used to having the ball at the back. Like now, for example, goalkeepers you see in the EPL, and they're really good with their feet. 30, 40 years ago, the idea of a goalkeeper having the ball at the feet, unbelievable. So that was a big difference in Spain, was that they were so far ahead of the UK in terms of they're coaching their kids. And that was from, sort of like a professional club's point of view. It was like, we're going to teach you to play. But I'd never really heard of that. It was teach them to play, not to win. And I was like, yeah, of course, as they get older, you then bring in the element of winning, depending on where you are. But it's true, when you look back now, are you going to brag, or, the best memory you've got is winning an under-sevens tournament? Probably not. But so that was the biggest difference, I think. And it's funny because being from England, we are so narrow-minded. We're soccer's the best in England. You can't tell us any different. I don't care how many World Cups Brazil have got. And then when they're when they're going for that, and you're yeah, it's not a bad philosophy actually. Maybe maybe you do have something over us there a little bit. So now in England, that's what we do. We teach them to play. But yeah, that was the biggest difference, I think.
In the 10 months in Palo Alto, was that when you said, you know what, I think I want to set roots here in the US and start coaching here? Or did you come back to the UK again and start trying to figure out maybe what the next thing was after doing that 10-month stint?
Yeah, I think the plan was always to go back to America. I really wanted to get my UEFA B license. I think that was something that, because I had a master's degree, and in America, you guys are so, that's a really important part of someone's, resume, is their education. In the UK, I could tell you that I've got a master's in sport management. No one cares. Everyone, they're very focused on the coaching qualifications from UEFA or the FA. Whereas in America, it's quite a nice balance. So when I was in Palo Alto, and I was there for 10 months, yeah, when I came home, the plan was maybe try and get my UEFA B and then come back to America. That was very much the plan. It didn't play out that way. And that was, I think, 2015, 2016. And so I was about 25, 26 at the time. And, I didn't know how I was going to go back to America because I hadn't really spoken to any college coaches. I did actually meet Peter Fewing, who's the Seattle University head coach, because just through a mutual friend, and which was great talking to him. But I never really thought of that. So when I'd gone back to England, the plan was to go back to America, but I hadn't really actually thought about how to do that. Because I felt with Challenger, it was great, and I'd done the camps, and then I'd done a 10-month stint, but then I was kind of I want to go kind of the next step, and so yeah, no, that was the plan, and yeah, just did nothing ever really goes to plan, does it? So it kind of it didn't. I stayed out in England. I worked in a gym, so I went back to my old college at Chester, and I became a fitness instructor, and I got on my UEFA B, and I had an opportunity to go back, and I said no. And this is probably my biggest regret, because I was, at the time, I was in a relationship as well, and I was close to my family, and so I was like, oh, I'll stay in the UK, I'll stay here and finish my UEFA B, and then America just wasn't meant to be. It just kind of just let that go by. And that was kind of like 2017 maybe. And that's when I got the role coaching the women's team at Warrington Wolves, which was probably the best coaching experience for longevity that I've had. I was there about 6 years. So yeah, I think that kind of 2015-16 period when I got back to the UK, and I was like, yeah, definitely want to go back, got on my way for B. And then I think just the longer I stayed in the UK, I was there for 3 months, 4 months, 5 months, 6 months. It just seemed harder to maybe go back to America. And that, like I said, I was in a relationship then, and I was close to my family, and it looked like that kind of opportunity then, just slipped away.
What was the experience like being a part of that whole Wolverton and all that kind of experience in terms of your growth as a coach?
Yeah, they were. That was the biggest like jump from being a coach, because I did my UEFA B when I was coaching them. So obviously like learning a lot off the course and learning from other coaches and applying it. And like that was when I kind of like, started to really coach a certain style of play, like an identity for me as a coach and what I liked. And they were great because, again, so Warrington they were called Warrington Wolverines, but they've now merged with a professional rugby league team. So they're just Warrington Wolves women's team. And I think they're like the 6th tier of the soccer pyramid in women's soccer. And again, though, they're all adult females, but they all work full time. They've got families, they've got responsibilities. And a lot of clubs at that level in the UK, the players pay a small monthly fee to help cover costs for referees, for pitches, for facilities, for things like that. So again, that's another point as a coach. It's like, whether the players are good or bad, they're an integral part of the club because they help the club run. And because there is so many amateur teams, again, it's a social environment. And Warrington is the players were excellent. We had some players who played at Preston North End or at Manchester City, or and players that maybe in the late 20s, early 30s that still really wanted to play and be competitive, but they worked full time, or they had, they couldn't come to practice tonight and they told me 20 minutes before because they had childcare problems. And then as a coach, that's just life, that's just, you can't hold that against the players. But that was where, I was in a joint. I was started off as an assistant coach, and then the manager left after a season, and then myself and Wendy Booth, we took it. She was like the chairperson of the club, and she was doing her UEFA B at the time. She works for the Football Association now in the UK. We kind of did it as a joint manager role, and absolutely loved it. Getting the players on side and trying to get the players to buy into sort of a certain identity and be competitive. And that the only difficult thing with that was that there was a lot of potential there for the players, but it was like they've got bigger responsibilities. They can't. So, and with the way I plan my practices, and I started doing this at Warrington, was like I would plan a practice, but every single player would have something that they could relate to on the field. So if I was doing possession or something like that, it wasn't just like 8v8, go and get the pennies. I would do it so like every player was kind of like accounted for, and so then if they asked me anything, I could say, well, I want you to do this and I want you to do this because on Sunday you're going to do this. And so then like when it's 20 minutes before practice and you're setting up, and then 3 players drop out because there's traffic on the motorway, on the highway, or my son's ill, so I can't come to practice. And then it's like, then you've got to really think on your feet and change the whole practice. So that was a big learning curve. But I just, that group of players, I was there from 2016 to about 2020, and then left for a year, and then came back for a year. And I'm still really good friends with a few of them. And in fact, two of them, one of them's getting married, and he just got married in Hawaii. And I'm going to go and see them next week. They're having because they were in Hawaii, they're having a big UK party next week. So I'm going to go and see them, and I'll see a few of the players. So it's really nice to kind of have that. Because again, being a coach there, it was difficult because it's like they want to win. Like it's not, yes, it's social, but it's like, no, we want to win. We want to have a good coach. We want to have a coach that we can buy into and understand what we're doing. but they also have to understand as a coach that, you know, we aren't full-time players. We have responsibilities, you know. So how do you manage that? How do you have a practice? You know, you have a player who scores one Sunday, they can't come to practice because they're working, and then you have a player in practice on Thursday who scores 5 goals. Who do you start on the Sunday? Because you know, you can't hold it against someone because it's so. And again, going back to communication at the start of this, communication was everything. If a player can't play or isn't playing, I have to tell them why. I have to talk to them and keep them on side and keep them optimistic and be like, look, you know, this is my thinking. And at least then they're still not going to be happy, obviously. But yeah, that was the biggest learning experience with my years at Warrington, definitely.
The one thing I love about it too is you talked about early on about why you love coaching was when you heard that the players wanted to have you back, and now here you are at the high, older level, and
Yeah.
now you're getting to go back and see the, at a outside of the game of soccer, but still in a way they want you to be around to see them at their, celebrating a wedding or just kind of touching base and stuff, which is so cool.
Yeah, I think that's like, and that ultimately that's it. Even like at college now, even at SIU, like, yeah, these players are going to play soccer, but they're going to go off and have careers in things, and they're going to do, you know, and it's like that for me is a huge part of being a coach, is that you build these relationships and you're investing your time in the people and not just the players. It's like I want you to go and succeed in whatever you go and do. You know, I want you to be fully committed to soccer and you want to get better, and you know, and of course that, and I love coaching, but you know, I'm excited to go and see. I mean, we just had a big recruiting class of seniors that have graduated. I mean, like 15 players, and I've only been there a year, but it's like, oh, it's great to like see where they're going to go and what they're going to go and achieve with their lives, you know. And with the world of social media now, you don't always have to be texting someone every single day. It's, you know, but you stay in touch and you get to see what they go and do. And so yeah, like it is great to come back to the UK. And it's funny because like one of the players at Warrington, because like, you know, I still keep up with their scores and things like that. They had a really good start to the season. They had a really good run in the FA Cup as well. So you're excited for the players. And I texted her and I said, oh, I'm back in the UK. And she was like, I've just got off the plane in Florida. I was like, oh, okay. It's like on vacation in America. I was like, oh, right, okay, brilliant. Yeah. So yeah, so it's nice to stay in touch and, you know, kind of still be a part of their lives in some way, you know, just kind of go and see them. Like when I was back at Christmas, you know, I went out, it was the team night out. So I went and saw some of them, and a few of the younger players that didn't know who I was, like he was that long haired guy that's just kind of like turned up. But yeah, so that is the best part of it. Like I love coaching, but I love being able to hopefully have a positive impact on the players, like from a soccer point of view, and make them better and feel like I made a difference. But then hopefully, you know, they go and do something and you can be like, yeah, that's great. Especially at college, you know, when you see them stressing out for their exams and what they're going to do. So that is definitely the best part of it. Yeah.
So you're mentioning the large graduating class at Southern Illinois. You go back after Challenger. He said it takes 4 or 5, 6 months, and then you're there for a handful of years. How do you end up at Southern Illinois?
So I think I think from like 2017, so I was with Warrington, and the pandemic hit. And so when I was saying before about, you know, kind of coming back after 10 months and being maybe America's just not for me, I think when the pandemic hit, I was still working full time as a fitness instructor. I was coaching Warrington voluntarily for those years. I got my UEFA B, and when the pandemic hit, I think probably a lot of people just kind of maybe reflected on their lives a little bit and kind of thought, you know, am I doing what I want to do? And in the pandemic, I moved to become a security officer. So again, I was working at Chester still. I feel like I've been at Chester all my life, and I was becoming a security officer there because it was good pay. And so I was doing that, and then I remember in the pandemic just thinking, yeah, I really wish I'd gone back to America. And I spoke to my dad about it. I was like, I just feel like I should have gone to America. You know, I stayed at the time because of other things in the UK, which was a big regret of mine. You know, maybe I stayed for not for myself, for other people. And sometimes you have got to put yourself first. And then the campus where I was working as a security officer was closing down, and they talked about, you know, voluntary severance and things like that. And I'd always had the idea, and my mum had always said to me, go and be a teacher. It's a solid career, you know, there's longevity in it. You get a pension, whatever. You're great with kids. You've got all this experience coaching kids. And I'd always kind of said, I've put all this time and effort into being a coach. I really think I can be a full-time coach. I really think I can do it. I know it's difficult, but I really think I can do it. And then when Chester was closing, and I didn't want to be a security officer for the rest of my life, but it was like, well, the money's helping pay the bills, and I'm doing some coaching voluntary. And I was like, yeah, maybe I should. So I applied at university to go back and become a teacher. And I arranged with Chester. I said, okay, I'll take the voluntary severance. So this is 12 months ago, actually. And this was in May. I was leaving, and I said, I want to leave in May, because before I go back to university in September, I want to go and do Challenger for another summer. I was like, I've not done it for 7 years, I think it was at the time. I'd always regretted not going back. And there's so many places I'd love to see. And if I'm going to be a teacher, I'm, you know, really never going to get that opportunity again. Even though all the coaches are typically like 19, 20 years of age, and last summer I was 32. So that's what I did. I just kind of, I was going to go to Denver, Colorado, and go to Wyoming and Idaho and places like that. So I left the university and went off to Challenger for kind of like, and it was kind of sad as well, because I kind of was giving up on that. I'm not going to be a full-time coach. You know, I'll always have the opportunity to be a volunteer and to do voluntary stuff and do things with Warrington, but there's always going to be that ceiling that I'm just never going to become a full-time coach. It's never going to be, when I wake up in the morning, my job. It's always going to be, I'm working, you know, I have a house, so I've got to pay the bills, and then, okay, I have a little bit of free time. And I was out in America, and I think it was like the start of July, and I saw the role come up at Southern Illinois. And it was, someone had put it in like the Challenger Sports. They have like an alumni group of all the people gone past, of all like people that have been there. And I was like, well, I'll apply for it. You know, I'll have a conversation with the coach. You know, I'll just see, you know. And honestly, like, I was never going to go and work at Southern Illinois. It was never going to happen. And then, yeah, I had a conversation with the coach at the time. And then I remember, this was like early July. And I was, where was I? I think I was in, I want to say I was in Idaho, and had the interview, and I got it. And I was like, oh, wow. And I was like, and I remember speaking to my mum and dad before the interview, and I said, like, this is what I'm going to do. I said, I'm just going to go and roll with it. I really don't think it's going to happen. Like, it's very hard. But, you know, why not? And then my mum and dad were brilliant, because I think my mum as well was a bit like, oh, I just convinced him to be a teacher. I just convinced him to finally go back to university and be a teacher. And now he thinks he's going to get this opportunity. And I just sold it to my mum and dad. I was like, look, I'm probably not going to get it. Like, there's going to be so many hurdles in the way. And I got the role. And then they said, we need you to be here on the 1st of August. And I was like, well, it's like the 10th of July and I'm in Idaho. And I have a contract with Challenger. So I think I got to Southern Illinois on the 15th of August. And in that time, I had to finish my contract with Challenger a bit early. So I had to do 2 other weeks of coaching. I flew back to the UK end of July, had to rent my house out, get that ready to rent it out to someone, sell my car, go and get the visa from London, get transcripts and things like that, and coaching certificates and university certificates to send over to SIU and all those different things. And then just, yeah, flew to Orlando, flew to St. Louis, and it was 2 o'clock in the morning, and I am not exaggerating. I had to pay $400 for an Uber from St. Louis Airport to Southern Illinois. Ridiculous. I was like, Southern Illinois and me are not getting off to a good start. They quoted me like 150, and then they say that thing where they say like, oh, there may be additional charges if you're getting picked up from an airport. And I was like, additional charges I can deal with. I was like, an extra 250. So like, yeah, I landed, it was like Monday the 15th of August. And yeah, I'll be honest, like it's been crazy. Like to think as well, 12 months ago, I was like kind of giving up on being a full-time coach and just being like, yeah, this is me kind of done. And but then having that opportunity, like that second chance, and I think when I actually got to SIU, and there was so many unknowns, where I was going to be living, what the schedule was going to be, meeting the players, doing all that, and I think the season began on the Thursday, the 18th. We played Lindenwood in the first like non-conference game. So I couldn't even tell you the players' names at that point. But I think through the whole process of doing that, it was like I'd rather, because I'd always wanted to do it and I'd always regretted it. I'd always rather try something like that and it not work out than always live with the what if and the regret of what could have happened if I'd have just done it, because I figured that, well, if it doesn't work out, I can always come back and train to become a teacher here. How many opportunities are you going to get to come in? And from a very young age, when I first wanted to come to America, I'd always said, I'd love to work within college sport in America. I'd always, just because just how amazing it looks. So yeah, to get to SIU, it was just like, to actually be there. And I was kind of like reflecting on it when I was flying back. I was like, what a crazy year. Like, I actually can't believe what's happened in that year. Like, and the experience I've had, like how amazing and how grateful I am. Like like the difference in waking up in America when the sun is shining and there is heat to the UK, like I should be due some like kind of compensation from my parents for making me grow up in the UK and waking up to rain and cold and wind and just that, like waking up in Carbondale and just going to work and just coaching. And you have players who book in for individual sessions at 8 o'clock in the morning. I just love it. That's like the best part, being out on the field. You get players who say, "Oh, am I okay to do a session at 8 o'clock in the morning?" I'm like, absolutely. Like, yeah, that's brilliant. Like, so yeah, that's how I got out to SIU. And like I said, it was a crazy journey. That kind of like 6-week period from the 1st of July to like the middle of August was like a complete blur, and I generally didn't think I would get out there, but I did, and it was the best decision I ever made.
I was going to say, once the craziness kind of settled down, I don't even know if it ever did, but what was it about the experience? You talk about having those individual sessions with players. What was it about the experience at SIU as a coach and just for you in general that you enjoyed so much?
I just loved, like, first of all, like getting that trust of the players, because like I walk in like 3 days before the first game and you're just kind of like, oh, hey, how's it going, and I really like that process of like getting to know them, having them small conversations, and then it's like, then they trust you enough to like, can I have an individual session? And then it's like they book in more and you get to develop them as a player. Because I love coaching on the field. If you have a squad of like 26, 27 players, you need those, those voluntary individual sessions at times to really get in and coach an individual. And so, I love that. And that's when you get to hear everyone's own individual story about how they got there. And, you obviously you hear about everyone's battles and things like that and kind of what they're going through. And, as a coach, you want to be able to support them and understand them as well. So, yeah, it was the fact that, like, I'm a soccer coach. Like, that's my profession. That's like what I'm doing. And I absolutely love it. I just, planning sessions and delivering them and everything about it, I just feel really, really grateful and don't want to take it for granted for 1 second. And, it was sad because I got there in August and then the season ended, I think the 31st of October, we got beat in the first round of the MVC playoffs. And I was like, and then like that week afterwards when it was like no coaching, and I was like, this is pretty difficult. I was like, I don't even know the players that well. Like, I've known them for 3 months. And then it's like, you go from coaching every day or nearly every day and getting to know them all to then it's like, oh yeah, no, like there's nothing. So then coming back for spring training, it was great. And it was, and working with other coaches, Matt and Alyssa was just really exciting. And I just loved it. I think it was everything that I'd hoped it would be, because obviously coming over here, some things aren't always as good as what can be made out. And sometimes things can be underwhelming. And it was like, no, like this is this past year, like, and I don't think the players, I tell the players how much I cared about them, and I just don't think they understand. I think they're just like, yeah, right, everyone says that, and I'm like, no, like, I love coaching, like, I love coaching this team, I love coaching these players, because I don't like, I don't care what they're, obviously we're a Division 1 program, so with the recruiting, yes, but like if you're a player and you want to get better, yeah, let's go. Like, like I want to make you a better player. Like I don't want to focus on like you can't do this and you can't do that. And I'd rather be like, right, okay, so you need to improve on that. Let's do it. Like, why would we not try and improve them? Like, that's what we're there to, like, let's go and coach. Let's, so I love it when the players have that determination to just get better and learn and have that passion to get better. Because then if you have that, then it's like, I'm in my absolute element as a coach.
That is an awesome way to shut this chat down. This is Kieran with Coach's Corner Chats with Jake Edwards, and I'm out. Peace.
Cheers.